Okay, so you want to run an illegal bookmaking operation? Here's the part that should sound too good to be true. You don't actually need to know who's going to win. You don't need inside information. You don't need to be good at sports. You barely need to care about the outcome at all. The math is built to make you money regardless. So if the math already guarantees your profit, why does almost every illegal gambling ring in history eventually need muscle? Start with the mechanism that makes bookmaking profitable, no matter who wins. Because it's simpler than it sounds, and it's called the VIG, short for vigorish. Here's why that number matters more than which team actually wins. If a bookmaker takes a $110 bet on each side of the same game, they've collected $220 total. Whoever wins gets paid $210. The bookmaker keeps $10, no matter which team covers the spread. The house doesn't need to predict football games correctly. It just needs to attract roughly equal action on both sides of every bet, and the math does the rest. Historically, this is exactly the problem that gave rise to layoff betting. A local bookmaker with an unbalanced book would quietly place a bet of his own with a larger operation, or with a national wire service, effectively reinsuring his own risk the way an insurance company spreads exposure across reinsurers. It's a detail that rarely makes it into the movie version of this business, but it's the mechanism that let a single corner bookmaker survive an unlucky week without going broke. And it's a big part of why organized crime networks historically wanted a presence at every level of the chain, from the street corner operator up to the regional layoff bank. Now, attach a real, extremely well-documented operation to that math, because this isn't abstract. It's exactly how Matthew Bowyer ran one of the largest illegal sports books in modern American history, right up until it became the center of the biggest gambling scandal in the sport's recent memory. For at least 5 years, operating out of Los Angeles and Orange County alongside Las Vegas, Bowyer ran an unlicensed sports betting business built on Costa Rica-hosted websites and a dedicated call center, serving more than 700 bettors at its peak. He didn't run it alone. Court documents describe a network of agents and sub-agents underneath him, including, notably, casino hosts, each earning a cut of whatever their assigned bettors lost. That's the same structural move you see in almost every large-scale illegal operation. The person at the top isn't personally taking every bet. They're running a franchise, collecting a piece of a much larger volume that other people are out there generating on commission. One of Bowyer's clients was Ippei Mizuhara, the interpreter for baseball star Shohei Ohtani, and the numbers attached to his account show exactly how fast the VIG compounds when someone is losing consistently. Between December 2021 and January 2024, Mizuhara placed more than 19,000 bets through Bowyer's operation and racked up a net loss of roughly $40.7 million. To cover it, prosecutors found he stole more than $16 million directly out of Ohtani's bank account. At one stretch, wiring Bowyer roughly $500,000 every few weeks, controlling the flow by quietly changing the phone number and email tied to the account so the bank's fraud alerts never reached anyone who'd notice. Run that scale of action through a 4.76% VIG and you start to see why illegal bookmaking has quietly been one of organized crime's most reliable revenue streams for a century. You don't need Mizuhara to lose every bet. You just need enough total volume flowing through the VIG over and over for the house's cut to become a serious business on its own. And Bowyer wasn't just collecting. By his own account, he was also a serious gambler himself, wagering as much as $300,000 on a single hand of baccarat and millions on single Super Bowls, which meant the same VIG grinding down his clients was, on his personal accounts, grinding down him. But notice what actually happened in that relationship, because it's the pivot point of this whole video. Bowyer didn't demand Mizuhara settle up after every losing week. He let the balance run. He extended credit, bet after bet, month after month, watching the number climb into the tens of millions. And the moment a bookmaker does that, the moment "you owe me" replaces "pay now." The business stops being pure bookmaking and starts becoming something else entirely: lending. And lending, even the illegal kind, comes with a cost that has nothing to do with the VIG. It's the cost of actually collecting what you're owed. This is where the muscle comes in, and it's worth understanding what that cost has historically looked like, because it's bigger and stranger than most people assume. Loan sharking connected to organized crime has, at various points in the 20th century, been estimated as the single most lucrative criminal franchise in America, after illegal gambling itself, and the two businesses have always overlapped heavily, because a gambler who can't cover his losses in cash is exactly the customer a loan shark wants. The classic street rate, dating back to the 6-for-5 rackets of the 1920s and 30s, charged 20% interest per week if the principal went unpaid, an annualized rate north of 1,000%. A number so extreme it only makes sense once you understand the borrower usually isn't shopping for the best rates. He's shopping for the only lender who will say yes at all. Modern versions of the same racket haven't slowed down. In 2010, California investigators broke up a loan sharking ring run by a reputed Chinese organized crime figure that had spent 18 months operating inside tribal casinos near Sacramento, specifically targeting gamblers, many of them Asian, with cash flow problems at the tables. Their rate? 5% interest per week. One victim's $100,000 loan ballooned to $400,000 in just 5 months. Investigators described the pattern as trapping borrowers in what they called a never-ending loop of debt and fear, extended over and over by lenders who had no interest in ever actually being repaid in full, because the interest alone was the far better business. Now, here's the part that should genuinely surprise you, because it runs against everything the movies have taught you about this business. Actual violence, in practice, is rare, expensive, and mostly a last resort, not because loan sharks have scruples, but because it's terrible business. A man with a broken leg can't go to work. He can't earn the money to pay you back. Researchers who've studied mob loan sharking closely have found that most transactions between a shark and a borrower are conducted amicably. With both sides satisfied, the borrower gets cash nobody else will lend him, and the lender gets paid, because the borrower has every incentive to protect his one remaining line of credit. Debtors in this world are sometimes described as pledging their own bodies as collateral. But the phrase is doing more work as a threat than as a literal description of what usually happens. The fear of violence, not violence itself, is what keeps the payments coming on schedule, week after week, from people who have nowhere else left to borrow. A Chicago juice man interviewed decades ago laid out the actual arithmetic. Paying an enforcer to break a deadbeat's leg is expensive, and a broken leg produces $0 of repayment. So violence, when it happens at all, isn't really deployed as a collection tool. It's deployed as an advertisement, a visible, occasional example that keeps the other 99% of the client list paying on time without ever needing to be touched. The cost of enforcement isn't the beating. It's the reputation the beating buys you, amortized across every other debtor who hears about it and decides not to test you. That's exactly the shape of what happened once Bowyer's own collection problem got real. When Mizuhara stopped answering some of his calls, Bowyer didn't send anyone to break his legs. He didn't need to. According to reporting on the case, Bowyer instead sent a text warning that he was watching Otani and threatened to talk to him directly, a threat aimed not at Mizuhara's body, but at his career, his relationship with baseball's biggest star, and the secret he was desperately trying to keep buried. In a modern operation built around a high-net-worth client with a reputation to protect, information and social leverage did the same job a broken leg used to do in a 1960s Chicago neighborhood. It applied just enough pressure to keep the payments flowing, without ever escalating into something that would blow up the entire operation. The enforcement cost was still there. It just didn't need a fist. Put the whole business together, and you can see exactly where the money and the risk actually sit. The VIG itself is nearly a mathematical certainty, a 4.76% cut on every dollar of balanced action, requiring no skill at picking winners, only skill at pricing risk and attracting equal money on both sides of every line. Underneath that, an entire commission structure of agents and subagents extends the operation's reach far beyond what one bookmaker could manage alone. Each of them paid a percentage of what their own clients lose. But the moment credit enters the picture, the moment a bettor like Mizuhara is allowed to lose $40 million without paying as he goes, the business quietly converts into something closer to underground lending, complete with weekly interest rates that would be criminal on their own, even without the sports betting attached, and a collections problem that has to be solved through reputation, pressure, and occasionally the credible threat of real harm, because a civil lawsuit was never an option to begin with. Bowyer's operation ultimately came apart not because a debtor got hurt, but because the money trail did nearly 17 million stolen dollars, laundered in part by converting cashier's checks into casino chips and back into cash at Las Vegas properties, eventually surfaced in an investigation that ended his business, cost him a prison sentence, and triggered roughly $34 million in regulatory fines against the Nevada casinos that failed to catch it. The VIG never stopped working. It guaranteed a profit on every balanced bet, exactly the way it was designed to. What actually took the whole thing down was the same problem that has ended illegal gambling operations for 100 years before his. Someone owed more than they could pay, and the machinery built to solve that problem, credit, pressure, threats, and the people willing to make them, left a trail that math alone never could.